I think we're live. Are we live? We're live. Let me press record. Someone's put a comment on YouTube. I can't read them because the screen's over there. I'm here. My phone's charging there. It's a hotspot. So, Gemma, you can read the comments.
Oh, yeah.
It's like in the old days when, I've got to say, welcome to Newcastle Central Library, which is a wonderful facility here in the heart of the North East. Have you got the sound fest there ready?
Yes. Hang on.
So the answer is no, we haven't.
On YouTube. You have to go to YouTube. Packed audience here in Newcastle.
Thanks for coming.
Hello, Newcastle.
Hello, Newcastle.
It hasn't worked yet.
Hang on.
I feel like Bruce Force.
Carry on, I'll get it in a moment.
I feel like the start of Play Your Cards. What a wonderful audience. It's so much better than last week in Catherine.
There's nothing like being prepared, is there?
No, it would really upset the two
And
people.
this is nothing like being prepared.
There you go. We're live in Newcastle. It is the eve of the 2021 Rugby League World Cup. I don't know if you've noticed, by the way, the esteemed panel here, which is very representative of the Rugby League press box. That if you type in hashtag RLWC2021 on Twitter, nothing comes up. If you put 2022, it comes up with a little trophy icon.
Alright.
So Twitter have done us, so you're going to have to use both hashtags now.
Jack Dorsey's fault.
Jack Dorsey. Whatever happened to Tom from MySpace? Where's he?
Probably in the same place as my MySpace site is.
Gary Carter from The Sun.
Remember Bebo?
Bebo.
Yeah.
That's because Matt's younger than all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I
I was a
remember.
Bebo demon, yeah.
What's your job title, Matt, these days?
Oh, that's a good question. Rugby League live editor. A bit of a mouthful.
Then editor-at-large, editor-editor.
Managing editor.
Managing editor. Too many job titles. Welcome to our pre-World Cup panel. Unfortunately, the World Cup are having a gala dinner, none of which have we been invited to. Well, we haven't been invited to.
Wouldn't have gone anyway.
No. We've been to the pub. Purely on soft drinks, despite what things may be. On the Brian McDermott scale of 2 to 9, Gary Carter, how excited are you for the Rugby League World Cup? It's finally here.
Well, if it's the Brian McDermott scale, I'll probably go 2. 2 being the highest you can get.
I hope he's not watching.
I hope he's not anywhere near where I am. Having just said that,
He's preparing Fiji. You'll see.
I might not be on next month's podcast. That's right.
Propping up the foundations of the Newcastle flyover.
Now it's finally here, though. I am starting to get excited. I mean, all week, obviously, we had the launch on Monday in Manchester, which was great, if a bit running late. Really enjoyed the speech from the MP fella. The poetry was wonderful. And now, it's here.
It's here, but I mean, the excitement's always been there. I mean, I was at the World Cup business event in Manchester about 3 weeks ago now, and Tony Walsh was there then, and the speech he delivered then was just as good as the one he gave at the World Cup launch. But the way, it's sort of like you appeal to different sort of, now we're sort of appealing to sort of everyone, whereas that was a very sort of specialised audience it was appealing to. But even then you could sense that they were excited, like the business community was excited, which is one of the main things that they're aiming for the World Cup tournament.
How excited are you, Matt?
Oh, I'm very excited, to be fair. If you'd asked me about a week ago, I wasn't excited at all, because I was on a week off. I was in Benidorm. Gemma knows all too well about that trip.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Long story.
That's the,
after the podcast.
that's the Director's Cup.
And but now, yeah, launch was good. I think the thing that's got me is seeing all the teams in all the various random locations across the UK, like Cook Islands and Middlesbrough. It just sounds odd, doesn't it? But it's been great. And you know what? The more I look into it, the more I think I don't know who's going to win this thing. You know, not it's like Super League. You think you always go, oh well, Cass could have a year, or not Wakefield, but sorry, Richard. But Salford could do something, or and no, they couldn't, not really. But then with this, like Samoa could have a run, Tonga could have a run, England could have a possibly have a run. I think that's great. It's a bit of unpredictability that we've not had before.
England could have a run. Come on, England. The audience going, come on, England. Tony, how excited?
Well, always excited. But International Rugby League, I think some of the best times I've had in the sport have sort of been for international games and international tournaments. There's nothing better really than wandering the world watching Rugby League. And one of the things that always seems to get levelled at the game, in fact people used to say, didn't they, if you want to travel the world, play Rugby Union. If you want to travel Wigan and St Helens and Leeds, play Rugby League. But it's always been a little bit of a myth, that. And I mean, I personally seen games in the Lebanon and Beirut and Russia. I wouldn't want to go there at the moment, but in Moscow, Tatarstan, south of France, obviously, places like that. And that's without getting into the Pacific Islands and Australia and New Zealand. So you kind of get around the world, and Rugby League's always had that international dimension. But as in a lot of other ways, it's never really targeted it properly or tried to organise it in any meaningful sense. And I think that this World Cup is the culmination of a lot of things, really. Even the 2000 one, which everybody ridicules and says was rubbish, was the start. Well, actually 1995 was the start. 2000 sort of pushed that idea out that you could have teams from Lebanon and places like that. And now we'll laughs at Lebanon. They're taken as a completely natural team to be in it this year. We're going to have Jamaica. So I think if you're a Rugby League fan, you've got to look forward to something like a World Cup.
No point asking Phil how exciting it is, 'cause off the scale, even of Brian McDermott's scale.
If there was a competition for the giddiest kipper, it would indeed be me. Absolutely passionate about International Rugby League. I can vaguely remember the 1970 World Cup final, the notorious Battle of Leeds at Headingley, where we all, well I say we all, I was only young at the time, but we turned up being told to expect a Great Britain victory, and they lost in a match that turned out to be more violent than rugby. But that sort of fired the fact that every 3 or 4 years you'd see a touring team come over, be the Kangaroos or the Kiwis, and there were major events. As a little insular northern town where we used to love when Great Britain was on tour, getting the Yorkshire Evening Post and going, I wonder where Wide Bay is. Great Britain have been there. I've no idea. But then when they used to come over, and I can vividly remember the 78 Kangaroo tourists were in a local pub called the Chain Bull, sadly not there anymore. There used to be a very, very big rugby league pub in the north of Leeds. George Broughton, who played on the wing for Leeds in the 50s, was the landlord and always used to invite the tourists up. And we were just in there, and there were Australian tourists there, in their tracksuits with kangaroos on the back, and we got them to sign beer mats. And you never forget moments like that, and only International Rugby League can do that. So yeah, this is what the third one will have done, where we've recorded every single minute of every game, and it's just a joy.
For our audience here in Newcastle, Phil's from the mean streets of Leeds, you may have heard about them, on the news recently. I'm talking to them, empty chairs, they don't know.
You and Liz trust in those mean streets,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Dangerous streets. I mean, we've all been to Headingley, I thought.
Well, mentioning Liz Truss has just dated this podcast no end.
Yeah. Probably out of date by tomorrow.
Gemma, are you excited for the World Cup?
Yeah, bring it on. Excited for Tonga more than anything.
Is that anything to do with rugby?
Oh, everything's to do with
Sorry.
rugby. Phil.
Because that's a terrible thing to insinuate.
Yeah, I want to see Tonga again. I loved Fiji last week with the hymn. I like those little touches. They're the things that you don't see in the domestic game.
That's actually been the disappointment of the tournament so far for me. I went to the Shea, which is a long trip for me, all of a mile and a half, to watch Tonga France, and they did the pre-match ritual. They announced it, they were ready to do it, good to go, and then they just kicked off. Loved it. Just didn't do
There
it.
were 2 hackers at Leeds for that one.
I know. Well, that was the one saving grace. Did make the trip. I did 2 games in one day, which unlike me, I don't normally work hard enough for that.
Doing that tomorrow.
No,
Me and
not
Rich.
tomorrow for me. Oh yeah, good man, good man.
And I might be asleep for most of the second game, but
Yeah.
Was it a good atmosphere though? Because at the last World Cup, the Tongan game was the one that had like the ultimate atmosphere. And I appreciate we can't replicate that over here, but it did look like a community came out to support that
It was
game.
unbelievable. I don't know how well people know the Shea, but the banquet suite has like a little, I want to call it balcony. It's not really a balcony. It's whatever you want to call it. And they were all on there, and they all had the flags draped over them. There was a guy who I can only describe, I think, you know, the Union Jack suit that you see people wear at the races. He had like a Tongan equivalent on, which was brilliant, just all red. And there was one guy, and I don't know how he got it through security, because at the Shea they don't let you bring anything in, like a bag of sweets to take away. He came with the biggest speaker I've ever seen. He was just carrying it around above his head, just blaring music out. And other fans were like, they wouldn't even let me bring an apple in.
Who was going to stop him?
Well, I think this was the thing.
Yeah, the Tonga England game in Auckland at the 2017 World Cup was one of those I was there moments. Like, we turned up for the game about 3.5 hours before kickoff, and the place was rammed full of Tonga fans already. By the time kickoff came, the game was almost like spot the England fan. It was like, oh, there's one. Oh, there's one. But honestly, the press box at Mount Smart was at the very back of the stand, and 3 rows in front of the press box was a bride and groom who literally came from the chapel. Like the bride was still in a wedding dress, and the groom was in his suit and everything. And 2 seats along from them was a guy who was probably about 6'6", 4 foot wide, not an ounce of fat on him, and he had this massive Tongan flag, and he just held the Tongan flag up all like for 80 minutes. I felt like shouting at the press box, is your arm not hurting, mate? And weirdly, the moment that sealed it for England, the Andrew Fafita knock on, I actually had to watch that knock on through a Tongan flag, because it was right behind where the Tongan flag was. But it was unbelievable.
Things that I want to see, like those little quirks that are in the crowd, outside the stadiums, in the build-up, down in the fan zones. Those are the things that I want to see this tournament. Obviously, I want to see the product on the pitch as well, and hopefully England gets to the final. But I want to see the communities coming together.
Yeah, I think that's more important for a nation like Jamaica, who I think when you look at the squad that they've got and the group that they're in, may not make the quarterfinals, but they're going to bring something different from the cultural side of things. Steel bands under the South Stand ahead, and it'll be fantastic. And that's what it's all about, isn't it?
I remember
people there who perhaps you wouldn't normally see at Rugby League.
I remember when Jamaica made the Football World Cup in '98. Their World Cup friendly was at Manchester City, City's old main road ground, and there was 25,000 people there just because it was Jamaica. I mean, that's something you can't not tap into, you know, just for having Jamaica there. I mean, okay, they might have like 4 or 5 actual Jamaica-based players in the squad, but the fact it's Jamaica and the communities it opens up to the game, you just can't turn that down.
We don't want to talk about eligibility because we'll end up talking about Victor Radley.
Yeah, but I think we've got to get away from that. I don't even think that should be a topic. I don't think if there's any sport at the moment where there aren't heritage players. I thought the crowd were invading the pitch.
Well, you talk about Victor Radley, who was the most charismatic when we all spoke to him, like the one that was the best character.
But listen to Michael Checker and what it means to be the coach of Lebanon, and you know, it's his parents that had to emigrate from Lebanon to allow him to have the lifestyle he's had in Australia, and he wants to pay that back. I mean, I just don't think we even need to mention it or get hung up about it.
I don't think
it's
people,
fantastic.
I don't think people who moan about it are challenging enough about it. I mean, if you go back to I fell in love with cricket back around 2005 in the Ashes team. Well, how many of them were under the same eligibility rules playing for England?
Was it 5 of that team in South Africa?
Peterson had to play, hadn't he, for so many years to get eligibility?
Yes,
So they, but no one bats an eyelid and talk about that team as being one of the great sporting teams England have had over the past, this millennium. But it's the same, why does it matter in rugby league? It's typical rugby league, isn't it?
But there's 2 sides to this coin. On the one hand, everybody's saying it's the Tongan Revolution because it was the gang of 5 that decided they were going to follow their heritage rather than play for New Zealand. We've all lauded that and said, isn't that great? Because it's made them almost a tier 1 nation and more teams coming in. Samoa want to do what Tonga are doing, and then when other nations do it, we go, oh no, you can't do it.
Then when England bring in Victor Radley.
I know, it's like,
He'll be the winning play in the final.
How dare you play for your dad, for the country of your dad's birth? Shocking behaviour.
If you've got an England shirt on or a Scotland shirt on or an Ireland shirt on, you are representing that country. That's all that it comes down to.
And again, even in football recently, and I'm trying to think who the player was. Is it Matty Cash? I have no
plays for Poland.
Aston Villa, who plays for Poland, because his father's from
Was the
Poland.
Doesn't Bruce Sahar play for Ivory Coast now, having already played for England?
I'm not sure.
Oh,
and there's the
really,
Chilean fella at Blackpool.
Well,
Blackburn.
Blackburn. It
Yeah,
wasn't Stokes Brent Brereton, who's now Chile's Brent Brereton Diaz.
But again, no one bats an eyelid. So why do we harp on and on and on?
Well, I don't think it's only within the game.
But
I don't
yes.
think people from the outside harp on about
What's
it.
even better is we can have this debate in a couple of weeks' time when the Women's World Cup comes along, because they're playing for England, likely in the 7 shirt, is Courtney Winfield Hill, who's as English as you and I, because she's married to an English woman. Well, so,
Yeah.
I'm
That,
married to
that
an
actually is the other thing we need to sort of talk about straight away, is that this World Cup, for all the things we've all spoken about before, and on top of that, the competitiveness hopefully of it as well, so you've got more chances of people winning it than ever. Talking about the men's game, aren't we? We've also got a Women's World Cup and a Wheelchair World Cup as well, which are also going to get massive profile on the BBC. And so when you're talking about it being a potentially game-changing tournament, that's genuine, it's not hype.
No,
It's got real potential to
Right.
do massive things for this game.
And those players getting paid for the first time ever as well, that is like landmark.
Yeah.
I think Courtney Winfield Hill's the only player involved in the tournament who's married to a World Cup winner. So feel free to steal. I've been meaning to ask her about it for months, as Phil knows, but I've never had the chance to do it. So, feel free to.
Managed to get the Sid Hines line in 40-20.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good then. She didn't know who he was.
No.
She-
It says that.
So it should qualify. The men's tournament kicks off tomorrow because it does with England versus Samoa. And I've seen the pictures they put out today. St James's Park looks absolutely superb. I don't actually know what kind of atmosphere we're going to expect, because it's kind of journeying into the unknown in this World Cup, where for the first time on these shores, obviously 2013 seems a long time ago now, and it was, but it was a World Cup between England, Australia and New Zealand. Now we've got Samoa, Tonga, Fiji have been in countless semi-finals. Well, you can count them, I just can't remember. Three. And then you've got the other nations who are likely to put up a fight against each other. It is a really interesting tournament. And as much as, obviously we all want England to win, but if England didn't win and Samoa did or Tonga did, I'm not sure, what do you think that would do for the sport, Mark? Because I can't think of any other sport where, on a global scale, a nation of the size of Tonga or Samoa would be the world champions.
Well, I think what it would do is it would accelerate the growth of international rugby league. I think you would see what's happened. We've already seen it now, as Phil alluded to, with what's happened with Tonga and Taumalolo and the rest, and we've now seen it with Samoa. I think you'll see it more and more. And I think, I think Fiji's got, it's huge in Fiji's rugby league, but doesn't seem to quite get the same recognition as it does in how popular it is in PNG, as an example. But I think what we would see is even British clubs taking on more of these players from those countries. I certainly think the NRL already do a lot of that, but I just think even beyond nations in the World Cup, you look at, there are people in America who, it's not quite gone to plan so far, but want to make it work, and North America could it be the catalyst to tapping into their seeing that, well, if a country the size of Tonga can do it, why can't we, the United States of America, do it? I think, as long as, and this sounds awful because I have nothing against either, I think as long as Australia or New Zealand don't win it could transcend the sport. I really do.
Just picking up on what Matt said about Tonga and Samoa and North America, you see it a lot in the NFL. The amount of players who come from Hawaii, which is essentially a Polynesian island, just one of the American states, coming in, not only play in the NFL but become stars in the NFL, shows that the Pacific islands are almost like born to play sports like rugby league, like American football, things like that. So again, like Matt said, this tournament, and if Tonga and Samoa do really well in it, could open the game up to a lot of people of Pacific heritage who live in America now, thinking, I fancy a go at that.
I think France as well. I think the French game is at a real intriguing position right now. We've seen Catalans appoint a rugby union-based sporting director. There's a very obvious reason for that. They are planning to tap into that market. We all know that there are sceptics, even naysayers, even people who quenched the the decimation of French clubs in the European game. I think if they could make the semis, say, that could be huge for what they're trying to do over there, especially with the 2025 World Cup coming. So I think there are so many nations that would massively benefit from a good run, whatever that looks like for them.
I think it just elevates international rugby league, and if we are, tapping into whatever IMG may be proposing, if we're looking at, the IRL have had their congress here and there, we're still waiting for this 10-year calendar that I think was promised about 10 years ago. But if you put international rugby league on the agenda by what happens with this World Cup, and a Pacific Island team may win it, or we already know that England are going to be playing France now in an international mid-season window on a regular basis, then suddenly you are talking about, let's start with the international game and work down, rather than let's start with the club game and work up. And I would hope that that would be the major legacy of this World Cup, that everybody wants to know, when is the next time the Kangaroos will be coming? We'll be having a 3-test series with Tonga, who might be the world champions, next autumn. Will England be going on tour and taking in a test in Fiji and a test in PNG and a test in Samoa? And actually, once people start wanting it, it's going to happen. And if it happens, then the game will be enriched. And it's easier to turn the game around for an international pinnacle than it is wanting to play Casper 10 times in a season.
I must say though, I don't buy into the argument that you've got to either start with club and worry about internationals later, or vice versa. I think both can be a focus mutually.
Yeah, I just think
can work together. And a lot of people in this country, as you well know, Phil, domestic.
Yeah, but I think if we're talking about investment rather than supporters, then people see a World Cup like this and think we want to invest in the sport. The level they may not invest at is club level. It may be, what can we do to sponsor the England team, or to...
Do we not need clubs though?
Yeah, I just think we've had the pinnacle, the pyramid the wrong way around.
I don't disagree.
The clubs will grow bigger if England are bigger.
But my counter would be, the international game grows bigger if the clubs grow bigger.
I always say,
well, because of the development and production of
But
players.
I think if somebody who hasn't seen Joe Batchelor play brilliantly for St Helens all year sees Batchelor J12 brackets St Helens, they are inquisitive then to know who are St Helens, where are they,
I don't disagree.
I just think people will people who don't normally follow the sport will get more interested in it through that international dimension.
one thing I always say is that Leeds should be huge in Leeds, Hull and Hull KR should be huge in Hull, Wigan should be huge in Wigan, England should be huge in them all.
Yeah, but Sam Tompkins, he's from Wigan, and I don't like him because I'm from Leeds, so he should be.
But that issue comes back to a lack of international games.
I don't want people to think I don't like Sam Tompkins.
But if there was more international games where, regardless of who you support, Sam Tompkins was on your team, that absolute hatred wouldn't be there, because you would have to, even if it was begrudgingly, reluctantly and silently, had to support him at times, you would do, wouldn't you? And then maybe, I think that is an issue. That definitely is an issue as a result of a lack of international.
And also, if Sam Tompkins wasn't very good, would Leeds fans hate him?
But do people actually hate him? Because I just think it's a parody hatred, to be honest. They hate him because he's
so
awesome.
Good.
He's awesome.
The biggest cheer of any game is when Sam Tompkins makes a mistake.
Yeah.
And it's the biggest show of respect you can show to Sam Tompkins, as much as fans will hate it.
He loves the booing, he smiles. Because I was at that semi-final first aid Salford Challenge Cup. I was obviously researching the Salford end. And Sam was doing punditry in Channel 4, and the Salford fans were going hard at him. But he was just cheering and giving him a wave, and they loved it. Like, it's parody, I think.
It's about creating stars, isn't it? It's about creating stars.
Yeah,
exactly.
Again, you're going to do more easily through international league, because you're going to have people who don't watch the game week in, week out. Like tomorrow afternoon, for example, turning on the television in the afternoon and seeing rugby league players. And if anybody does anything incredible, they're going to remember that person. So that's the international game is the way to push the personalities within the game. and the personalities within the game are what will push rugby league. ultimately.
Brave called this, but Jack Wellsby will be Sam Tompkins in 10 years' time. You can already see it. Because
He might be this World Cup.
possibly.
This could be his stage.
But he's already got that swagger.
Yeah.
He's already, in his interviews, got, I was going to call it arrogance, but I
It's
don't
a
think it is.
confidence.
It's confidence. But people hate it. People hate it. He came out and said, if we win, we're the greatest team of all time. And people couldn't stand it. And then they won,
Yeah.
and he came out and said, we're the greatest team of all time, and people absolutely hated it. And if he carries on like that, people will absolutely hate him. But what's wrong with that? Because he's a character.
I
No,
love
no,
a
no
villain.
problem with
Like,
that
we
at
need
all.
more villains.
But also, that sort of comes back to like the self-deprecating nature of rugby league, which we've always had a bit of a chip in that way, where anybody who's got a slight bit of confidence and is good and knows they're good and tells you they're good is going to come in for a bit of stick.
Yeah.
When in actual fact, well, they're just telling you the truth, really, aren't they? Because they are good. Somebody like, of an earlier era, for example, somebody like Gary Schofield will come in for a lot of stick because he was a fantastic player, Gary Schofield. People either forget it or weren't around to see it. But he was an amazing player. But because he's got a big mouth, and he does have a big mouth, and sometimes he talks the truth and sometimes he's a bit of a stranger to it. But it's his opinion, and it's what the game needs. It needs opinions, it needs big personalities, it needs characters. And that's why I really like International Rugby League, because as soon as you get them in that area, then they transcend it. They go beyond what we all think as sort of hardened rugby league fans, and they get out into the general public.
I think you're disliking them for being good, aren't you? Rather than
No,
disliking them for
but I
off
think
the
the
field.
other thing is an appreciation of skill. Because I
Yeah.
think because we see it every week and come to expect it, we take it for granted. You know, I want to see Tommy Makinson score the kind of try that he scores most weeks. I want to see Dong Young announce himself on the international stage with something ridiculously spectacular that I think now, with the way certainly the BBC have got a digital arm behind all of the match coverage that they're doing, and certainly what IMG have told us, even in these sketchy plans, their initial proposals, this digital arm, League 7, is going to be massive and is going to kick in pretty quickly. They are going to appeal to a new audience because they're going to take areas of skill and show them to a younger and a more, I think, an audience that is more less critical because it's got no baseline to compare it to.
What would be great, of course, after Saturday when Dong Young scores a hat-trick of tries and we're all celebrating and high on the hog, is if I could go into a shop and buy a shirt with Dong Young, his name and his number on the back. Because I know the Australians have ruined squad numbers for everyone. But Dong Young could become an icon with his number, which I don't know because I've not got it written down in front of me.
14.
14. He could be, but number 14 is the first sub. That's not attached to any position. He could be Rugby League's number 14. He could
Yeah,
be
but
the
Pete-
Johan Cruyff of Rugby League.
Certainly in England and the UK, they're used to the squad numbers thing now because the Premier League have had them for 20 years. So
I think because I've come from watching ice hockey and American football in the past, it's just something that's just happens. Just used to it.
But again, that's another example where we've got baggage, and your hard and fast rugby league fans carry baggage with them. And when you get a tournament like this, the vast majority of people watching tomorrow will have no baggage, none whatsoever. They won't know that Dom Young plays in the NRL. They won't know that. They won't know that he's pushed Ryan Hall out. They won't care about it either. And if he was to score a hat-trick tomorrow, then he would become instantly better known than poor old Ryan Hall, immediately.
I was sticking a statue up for him in Wakefield if he scored a hat-trick.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
just not far from here,
Is
there's
that
a
Wakefield,
huge
New South
pillar in
Wales?
Newcastle, and the grey monument.
Gray's
Well,
man,
he'd be on the top of that only this tomorrow tea time if he gets a hat-trick in the opening game.
now that would be a story if he's on the top of that tomorrow.
It would, yeah. Well, I might be on the top of it, actually.
That wouldn't be a story.
It would for me.
I mean, Victor Radley and Tom Burgess have been seen on scooters.
Yeah, they've been
like,
spotted
flying
on
around
scooters flying
Newcastle
around
this
Newcastle.
afternoon.
Oh,
Oh, no,
that
don't
doesn't
tell
sound...
me that. Because one of them nailed on to
Yeah.
fall off.
Yeah, that's got
Yeah,
freak
Sean
injury
Wayne.
waiting to happen, hasn't it?
It's not too long ago, I remember being on one of these Sean Wayne media calls where he was just after he'd been to Australia and Dom Young wasn't returning his calls, was he? So this has all turned around very quickly. He's gone from shooing for Jamaica with his brother to now starting for England in the first game of the World Cup.
Stories, that's the other thing. Big stories.
Dom Young's played his way in simply.
Whether it's falling off your bike or whether it's scoring a hat-trick, there's stories, and they're getting the sport into newspapers and onto TV bulletins. Just driving up here today on radio, I'm not a Radio 1 listener, I was being given a lift by my daughter, But anyway,
Come on, you're a big fan of all the things on
the
Radio 1
Rugby League
anymore.
World Cup led the sports headlines on Radio 1 today.
I'm just imagining you with Radio 1 pumping out your bass bins out your boots.
Strictly Six music, mate. So I'm very elderly, but try to stay a little bit cool.
I listen to Six music.
I'm
Well,
having
in St. Paler, though, you've got the Metro newspaper that is like on every train station, platform, every bus.
Tara Jane Stanley, the woman of
And
steel.
there's a rugby league wraparound
fair
on
enough,
it.
Tom Halliwell.
Like,
Can't argue with that.
big
No,
time.
there's a strap on the front page of the Daily Express this morning, which is completely unheard of for rugby league, I would have thought. So it gets you in places which the domestic game is just not going to get you.
And we
Yeah,
and
it's
and was a rugby league story on the front page of the Sun, was it yesterday?
Rugby league story on the front
Well,
page.
Richard
of the
Marvel's
Sun.
on there, he plays rugby league.
Ah,
Number one
well,
for Ireland.
If you're giving it, if you consider that, I suppose you're right.
Well, you can't pick and choose your stories, that's the other thing. And I think a lot of people in rugby league have also traditionally been quite sensitive, and they're going to have to be prepared if the game does ever change in that way, that we all want it to, and start to get more coverage, to have every moment scrutinised, and also the people running the game, by the way. They're going to have to be prepared for that as well.
I was just going to say, if you want to take the game to a new level, you have to be prepared for that new level of security, new level of coverage, don't you? So
You do, yeah, and it's not all going to be positive. So, you know, that just goes with the territory.
Well, this is where for a long time I've advocated that if you are a professional rugby league player, or if you are a top-level female wheelchair player, whatever, go over your social media and just delete everything. We've seen this week, was it 5 cricketers were charged by the ECB? 2 of them were women posting something 10 years ago where they were in blackface, before they were, you know, obviously they shouldn't have done that, but if you're aware now of what things you should and shouldn't do, you should go back and delete that. Because if you haven't deleted it, well, you're doubly stupid to do it in the first place.
Yeah.
But it's going to be an interesting time, and as you say, with the added women's and wheelchairs exposure in this World Cup, it's going to be interesting to see how those players become acclimatised to a different kind of pressure, because it's okay being on Sky, it's okay being on our league, it's okay being on podcasts or whatever, but they're going to be on BBC Two, they're going to be on BBC One throughout this tournament. People are going to know who they are, for better or worse. So I hope they're prepared for that, because it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, but they've got the best stories, particularly the wheelchair squads. There's unbelievable backstories to anybody that plays that game, and the more that people get exposed to it and are in shock and awe as to what happens, the more they'll want to know how those who are playing it, who may have suffered for their art, for how they got into that chair. That's the story we want to tell. The same with the women. I mean, everybody's been captivated by what the Lionesses have done. There is an appetite for women's sport. We've got women who are doing the most incredible things, making the most unbelievable sacrifices and not being paid for it. And they are great stories, and we need to tell those stories. And again, in terms of perhaps what the international game can do ahead of the club game, there might be a sponsor out there that says, actually, don't know a lot about rugby league, but I really admire what these women are doing. I really like the name of my product across their shirt.
I was really pleased to see IMG focusing on the women's game, because that can be huge. And where we've come so far, which is great, I mean, we've made a lot of advances, but it's slightly alarming to me that we're still, that our top clubs in the women's game are St. York are probably the difference that proves the rule, really. Wigan, Leeds, we have to have bigger ambitions than that. There's no earthly reason why women's rugby league can't be far and wide. It doesn't have to stick to the same old footprint. It doesn't matter how many people are turning up to watch it. Nobody's being paid at the moment. There's no excuses at all for the game not to be actively going out and seeking other clubs and asking them, can you put a team forward? You know, we're playing a game down at Arsenal, aren't we? In this competition, you should be asking Arsenal, you fancy having a women's rugby league club? There's absolutely no reason why those sorts of things can't happen. So it's very encouraging to see a company like IMG are obviously tuned into that and saying, look, don't make the same footprint of 1895 now. This is not 1895. There's no reason why your top clubs have to be these clubs.
And linking back to the exposure and the publicity and also the venues as well, the key message I give to everyone in all 3 squads is the game you're playing hasn't changed. It's still the same game you play at, say, Busvale as you would do it at the Emirates or Old Trafford. There's no different version of, it's not like a BBC version of Rugby League than there's a Sky version of Rugby League. It's just the same game. That's the message I say to everyone in all three squads. The game you play doesn't change because it's a World Cup.
But we've all got to be looking forward to surely the first captain who completely cocks up the captain's challenge. Like in cricket, it's brilliant. We go back to the Ashes a couple of years ago at Headingley and Ben Stokes' ridiculous innings, and of course he's got a Rugby League connection. But that wouldn't have happened had the Aussies not wasted their reviews. So we're going to have the same here.
I love it. I always love the NRL when whoever's made the error is adamant to the captain that it's nothing wrong, challenge it, and he's blatant. Love it.
Yeah.
And the rest of the team just scowl at him.
I think Elliot White had said in the week, he said he has actually done the captain's challenge for Canberra, but never wins any of them.
Promising, given he's one of the only ones with experience of it.
Yeah.
We generally everything is done. There aren't too many rule changes, are there?
It's sort of an amalgamation of Super League rules and NRL rules. The captain's challenge is the biggest NRL thing that's been brought in. Also, apparently, to play the ball with the foot, which I know one soccer fan will be very keen to see with his signs. He had his signs at the Fiji game as well. But and then I think these sort of more Super League sort of slants on the set restarts and the
I like the 18th man concussion rule.
Yeah,
I think that's taking the
that's
game
brought in
forward.
as well, yeah.
That you name your 18th player, and if you have 3 concussions during the game, that 18th player becomes active.
Yeah.
Again, I think that shows that at a time when clearly there's a lot of litigation going on, and there'll be multiple eyes on what sports are doing to protect their players. I think that's a really important
It's a
issue.
nod to the reality of the situation we're in, isn't it?
Without moaning, though, I'm going to moan.
Without moaning, no.
This is the Negative Rugby League podcast you're allowed to.
No, it is a bit frustrating, isn't it, that we don't have, we all have to learn the umpteenth version, interpretation of Rugby League's rules for the World Cup. Surely, a priority beyond this must be to get a set of rules that both Super League and NRL can abide by. What can there might be, so I might be able to prove me wrong here. Can anyone tell me another sport where there are different interpretations of the rules?
Well, I mean, the only one could be cricket, but those are different formats within the
Of
sport.
course.
Well, you don't have DRS in India or Pakistan, do you? You don't have the video review system in India or Pakistan, do you?
But apart
I
from...
think you can have local rules in any sport. So if there are conditions that, like there's 8 foot of snow.
Oh, it's like when you play
there's
Monopoly, you put money on the free parking.
But you would have thought there was a codified set that virtually covered all the professional.
The best one is, as we mentioned last week with Tamsin Ranouf in Catterick, was the women's game over here, the international game, 80 minutes, Australia 70. We've got the 40-20, they've got the 50-30.
It's just, honestly.
They get paid to run around for 10 minutes.
And you would hope that another of the things that might come out of this is that the IRL has more say in what it wants to do for the sport. I think there are some people coming on board. Luke Lacoste has obviously now been made the vice president. He's going to be in charge of the next World Cup in 2025. I think Peter Volandis and Andrew Abdo are coming on. You'd hope there'd be a little bit more communality among things like when we're going to play, what rules we're going to play under, what priority international rugby leagues. Because if you've got the right people on, then it's not just another group of people with no power that are trying to exert it over people that have all the power but don't want to ruin it.
IRL don't feel rudderless now, does it?
Not as much as he did. I think Troy Grant's done a great job.
Yeah,
Has he got rid of the Excel spreadsheets?
It's no longer a tuck shop.
Yeah, the tuck shop mentality with the accounts and everything.
Oh, touch that.
You woke up when he said tuck shop.
Yeah.
Because you're looking forward to the media food across the World Cup.
Oh,
Must be some
well, if it was anything like the last World Cup, then yes.
You know,
Oh,
There
so-
was
so-
a load of food.
it was
We should
probably
point
easier to
out
say what
for,
you didn't get.
We should point out for anybody who's unfamiliar with 4020 magazine, I can't imagine there are many who are, but Gemma's column is a regular haunt of food, isn't
Food
it?
and books.
Can I
In
just
press
say, I am not on stage because there was an incident in the pre-match
Don't tell them.
warm-up, and somebody that is visible fell off the stage, and now I'm scared that if I sit on the end,
And you only had one.
I will fall off the stage.
Can I
So-
point out it wasn't me?
I like to
It
be...
wasn't me either.
Can I point out
He
it was
wasn't
Rich?
here.
It was Rich.
I mean, if anyone
Slow
wants to
motion.
sign Richard up as a stuntman, it was awesome.
Was it filming by then?
No,
No, it wasn't.
No.
No, it wasn't.
It was unreal though. I'm like, I'm still
Like in
thinking,
slow
well, I'm not
motion.
sitting up there for
It was like when Callum Watkins
It
was
wasn't,
at
but the dent on that metal plate on that door wasn't there before.
That's where I got the recording for the applause.
What else has happened apart from the World Cup? Is there anything, because we'll come back to what we think about it, is there anything else that's happened apart from York have changed their name? What, York Valkyries fan?
Well, York are now York RLFC. Knights of the men's and Valkyries of the women's, aren't
I like it.
they? No, I do, yeah.
Good on him.
I think like York City as a thing, it just confused me with the football club. But, you know,
Yes,
they're not,
true.
because they're not connected to them. So why
True.
have the word City in there? It's not when Salford had City in there for a bit.
It's when, I think, if I remember rightly, it's when York had high ambition, after years of toil and struggle and misery, that they were going to sort of rebrand themselves as a big city club, which they
Yeah.
are, of course. So I think that's where it came in. But yeah, it's probably outlived its usefulness now.
Rydale, York City, Knight Valkyries.
Try and fit that about
Yeah.
it.
I mean, and Jake Connor's gone to Huddersfield, so... Yeah, so. Where's Luke Gale going? Does anyone know? Apart from Wakefield.
Matt Shaw must know.
So, you know.
I can honestly tell you I don't know.
Wow.
That's more an exclusive
I'm
than telling us something that he does know.
disappointed in your performance there.
My,
Disappointed.
Yeah, no, I don't
Would
know.
York have a look in it?
Don't know.
Oh, Zach Hardacre, he's about.
I wouldn't be surprised if Zach ends up at Featherstone.
I have a feeling now that Jake Connor moving from Hull might see him end up there.
Yeah, true. No, I have
No.
heard. I've heard the.
Don't think they've got the cap space. I think.
They've got rid of quite a lot of it. So.
Well, yeah, but
Yeah,
they'll
true.
bring
Just,
in.
just announced someone else
They're
there.
going to bring in Newcastle halfback Jake Clifford.
Yeah.
So Clifford will come in, but Clifford's going to take up a fair whack.
Mm.
There's not going to be enough to sign Zach Hardacre with what's left from Jake Connor's admittedly large salary.
But he can't go to...
Well, they lost a half-back halfway through last year, so they've saved a bit of salary cap there for Clifford.
But they've brought in an extra centre.
Tex Hoy.
Hoy's come in. Dwyer's gone in. Truman won't be cheap.
Sutcliffe's gone in.
I don't think he'll go to Hull.
No.
I don't know where he'll end up, Hardacre.
I wouldn't be really wouldn't be surprised if he ends up at Featherstone.
That's where I think he wanted to end his career, but in Super League. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's quite an attractive proposition.
Well, I was going to... I tell you what's a point worth raising. What's going on at Toulouse?
Oh, I thought you were going to say Keithley.
No.
Oh, Featherstone, that's all.
What's going on at Toulouse? Because from what I can gather now, they've got about 9 contracted players. Everyone's leaving or has left. There's players who were at the club that are signing for Elite One clubs. What are they doing?
But do they have to do anything other than wait for IMG to say you've got a category A? Like, so we were talking about that on the way up. You know, it's a shame that Newcastle have gone from full-time to part-time.
Yeah.
But the way the game is at the moment, why would you spend money? Yes, you can still get promoted.
Exactly, yeah. Why would you
But
spend...
you're in that
hundreds of
race,
pounds?
aren't you? You know, Featherstone have found out this year that, you know, when you've got 2 people trying to
Yeah.
run in a race, one of them is not going to be successful. So, you know, who's going to go for it from League One next year?
Yeah.
And why would Toulouse necessarily do that when they've got the stadium?
That being said, now
I don't know whether that's whether they're cost saving.
well, I might be miles off here. But I was told by someone who I tend to trust that from what they know of IMG's plans for criteria, they'd be staggered if there's any more than 4 Grade A clubs.
I was told 5 or 6.
But
So, you know, Toulouse aren't going on that. Toulouse aren't going to be a Grade A.
no,
club.
but they would rank as a high B,
High B.
and high Bs are going to be getting in Super League, aren't
Well,
they? I mean,
I
we're
think
talking
it's gonna be a hell of a lot
2025,
I think it's going to be hell of a
and
lot
it's a
higher
risk and a
being
gamble.
rated
But
clubs,
would you
to be
spend a
honest.
lot of money? That
you
didn't
say
need
high
to spend?
Bs though. If you're a B and you're in Championship, but you're a high B, I don't think that'll automatically get you Super League. I think there'll have to be some on-field performance to get you there. And if Toulouse are, well, the squad's decimated, they've lost everyone.
But France is also one of these key markets, along with
Yeah.
women and London. So, you know, does the same apply to London? Do London need to go out and spend big, or can they slowly and incrementally build their playing side, maybe as a part-time club, in the knowledge that the stadium they're at the moment and what they could bring to an IMG vision of what the sport should look like would take them higher up the B rankings at the moment when they kick in?
They're
And
essentially
maybe
the
Toulouse and London
building
is...
their academy sides, aren't they?
Yeah, would there be more value in Toulouse getting more young French kids in over the next 2 years so that when the grading comes in,
And maybe
they've ticked more
and
boxes?
maybe that is it. Maybe that's it, that they know, because we know that Catalans and Toulouse is going to be a minimum number of homegrown domestic
Yep.
players in need. So do they go, right, for the next couple of years, we're not bothering with his first team, we're putting all his money in. Maybe that is the answer. But I don't, I tell you what, next year, looking at Toulouse coming down, I really struggle to see how they'll be competitive next year now. I think it's a grand opportunity for any of the rest to get up to Super League, a Featherstone or a York, or dare I say a Halifax, if they can find a way. Widnes have spent some money.
Sheffield.
Heck, Keighley Cougar have spent some money, which would be very ironic
It
given
would.
what's happened in the last 24
Which is
48
why
hours.
perhaps they shouldn't be saying anything at the moment.
I would tend to...
Sheffield again have spent big for next year because I think they can see a playing opportunity.
Well,
So some
they've got
clubs will go
investor,
down that
haven't they?
route. They've got a very wealthy investor.
Jeremy Liversley, is it?
Very, very wealthy, but as wealthy as any of the investors in Super League. So I think some will go, let's spend now and try and go up there and stay there, and others will go, let's not spend, because we can see that there's a wider vision coming in a couple of years' time, and maybe we can be part of that.
Because whoever's spending big now is spending big on a thing where they don't actually know what they're going to be spending it on.
That's right.
So once you'll probably find that once teams know where they are and what they've got to improve, they'll spend on that. Mentioned Catalan before. Catalan is spending quite a lot on the ground as well because they've finally got clearance to do the one side where the tunnel is, and they want to do the other side as well. So they've got all three sides. I mean, admittedly, not going to get rid of the swimming pool anytime soon, but they only got all three sides, like the one behind the post as well. So it'll be a smart ground when that's done.
But I think you will see some clubs invest, like a Featherstone, because ultimately, if they can get up next year, and then the whole Category A, B comes in, if they're a Category B and there isn't 12 Category A's, they stay in Super League on field for in, until they finish. So there will be some clubs, and Featherstone will definitely be one who invest big, because the way that Toulouse are going, they're going to say, well, we're the favourites to go up. There you are.
Then everyone can moan that there's 3 teams from there.
Nobody's mentioned Batley.
No, it's just
I thought you
because
were
they got to the final.
Well, I
haven't they?
just did.
my only fear for Batley is they've lost a lot of good players, and as it stands, they've not replaced any of them. Keegan Hurst come back, but how do you replace Gilmore? How do you replace Hooley?
They always seem to do it though, don't they?
They do.
I mean,
Craig Lingason are wonderful.
Yeah, you look at them at the start of every year, and every year people say, well, they might just struggle a little bit this time. And they always seem to exceed expectations. It's just because it's a very well-run club. It's a bit of a cliche now, but it's true. And if a few more clubs at that level ran the game, in fact, at the top level as well, ran their clubs in the same way, the sport as a whole would be a lot healthier, certainly financially.
Imagine telling a Bradford fan 10 years ago that Batley would be the sort of benchmark of what you should be aiming to be. But that's not being derogatory for Bradford. That's absolutely true now, isn't it?
But I think the other thing, having spoken to Craig Lingard about it, because he writes an excellent column in a monthly magazine, he is cognizant of the fact that they can keep doing what they've done, but what they need is more crowd.
Yeah.
So, he'll get that family atmosphere around his playing group. He knows exactly what he wants from his guys, and when they buy into it, they become very difficult to beat.
Yeah.
Even though on paper they may not be the strongest looking team in the division. But even he said, our core gate is about 1,000. As a club, what we need to do is make that 2,000 or 3,000.
And
once they do, if they can do that, and it's not for the want of trying, absolutely. But you perhaps need a few more people involved in the running of the club to do
and
that.
it's not just the numbers. The numbers obviously important, but also younger audiences.
But then he'll
that's
be able
not
to
just
buy
at Batley
better.
either, is it?
No.
Everywhere.
It's a big problem. It's a big problem with the game, really, that you have an ageing fandom, if you like.
But
Less
then,
so at
but
the
then
top
he
of Super
can
League.
buy better players
Yeah.
on the back of that. So it is a
Which
chicken-
again
chicken
is
and egg
another
thing.
reason why World Cups are important, because if there's one thing that gets kids excited, it's wall charts that you can fill in and international competition. They feel like they're part of something big. So.
And it only needs, what is it, 20, 30 kids in the Batley area to want to pick up a rugby ball on the back of what they've seen, who may or may not have heritage to other nations.
And travel.
And just say, I want to go and join Batley Boys,
Yeah,
or I want
watch
to be at Dewsbury Moor. Or...
Greg Johnson playing for Jamaica.
Exactly.
And, how many kids are going to get excited about that in Batley? A lot, I would think. So that's a good thing. And it's something the game as a whole has to look at. And by the look of the IMG proposals, they've realised that it needs a younger audience.
On IMG, because I think it is it does link with the World Cup, even though they are two completely separate issues and maybe started off on different roads. They are merging with this World Cup tournament because we're looking at what the
Well, they're
future
certainly
of the
aware of
sport.
the international dimension, aren't they? Because that's one of the issues.
Do you think that I'm taking your job. Do you
Feel free.
think that the initial proposals were trying to walk before they ran? That they're trying to establish some degree of credibility with owners of the sport? They're trying to put a realistic timescale in so that people know exactly what they're doing, rather than just come in and go, right, we're changing everything, we're changing it tomorrow, and then you get dissent.
Well, I'm sure others will have their opinions. My reading of it is they're trying to tippy-toe through it all at the moment.
Yeah.
And I can sort of understand why, because people have always criticised the RFL, often quite justly. But the big problem the RFL's always had is the club owners. The club owners are all powerful in this sport, and it's unfortunate, really. Normally, I'm very much a sort of a Democrat. I'm for freedom of speech and all that sort of stuff. But I think when it comes to professional sport, it has to be run like a business first and foremost. And there are just too many voices of vested interest in rugby league. And the only way anything's ever going to change is when that changes. And you've got people running the game, a bit like in American football, where they take charge of the competition and they make unpopular decisions at times. At the moment in rugby league, that can't happen because clubs will have traditionally voted in their own self-interest. And that's often not the game's wider interest. So it's difficult because IMG come into that situation. Helping them somewhat is the dire financial state the game is facing at the moment. Things have to change, and I think more and more clubs now are coming to realise they can't carry on in the same old ways. Things do have to change, and I think that's starting to change minds. They realise that we can't, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always had, won't you? And I think that IMG are actually playing quite a canny game at the moment, and just at first I was a bit disappointed with it. I thought this is just hot air, there's no substance to it. But as it's gone along, and I've seen the little bits that they've put out today, and they were yesterday, extra little sort of tidbits, like for example, reading between the lines, you can see that the days of Super League are over. The name Super League will be gone soon. That's going to happen. But they haven't come out and outright said it because they're tiptoeing through everything. And the way that, all right, Keithley has spoken out. I think before Barrow spoke out as well. But beyond that, there's been very little dissent, has there, at the moment. The game does seem to be quite unified in the idea that it has to change. It's facing up to those facts. So on that basis, I mean, the proof of the pudding will be the actual details when they start to come out. But at the moment, I think they're playing a really quite canny game. North East.
I think a lot of what IMG have done is put a lot of responsibility on those clubs to say, look, okay, you think what you do is best, but our record is undoubted in what we do in developing things. Your very top levels, all right, but it's built on a shaky foundation. What they're doing is to make the foundations a lot stronger. And when you have stronger foundations, your top level can go even higher. The two key slides that I saw were the ones where they, basically the end game ones, whereby they want to go to a 14-team Super League eventually when they've got 12 Category A clubs, I think. But they were phrased as 2020 question mark, not 2026, 2027. So there's no hard and fast limit as to when we do this, because then people say, well, what if it doesn't happen by then? So they kept it fairly open-ended, that you build and build and build. Now, however long that takes to build, then it gets to a position where they can sort of make it a 14-team league from there.
I think the onus is effectively on the clubs.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to speak from personal experience here, because I know I can do it in Halifax. And Halifax have been in Championship for 20 years now. And I think for the vast majority of that time, whoever's been in charge, whoever's been on board has gone, well, of course we have ambitions to be Super League, but it's all empty words. You know, they don't really. Of course they have ambitions to be Super League, but not going to actually do anything to really do anything about it.
Or have the resource.
Or simply have the resource to do it. Absolutely, and that's why they can't do it. But now, for clubs like Halifax who say this, well, IMG are going to go, okay, well, this is what you need to do. And if you do it, you're in. Happy days. So the fans who blame X, Y, and Z, well, it's all on the clubs now. The clubs have to go, right, okay.
I think Halifax is really interesting because they've just had a consortium take them over.
Yeah.
And some of the rationale behind that, and as you say, the proof of the pudding will have to be in the eating, was they looked at the IMG proposal and thought this is the right time now for a group of concerted businessmen with some resource behind them because they've combined it, to actually look at the club and say, right, we're going to be told what we need to do.
Yeah.
and so we're going to be in a position to do it. So that change has already happened. I don't know enough about the Keighley situation. I've not been there for years. I'm not in contact with anybody that decided to make the statement. I just think, again, that Keighley may have an issue behind the scenes about how they become a Category A club.
Yeah.
Now, whether you hold the game back because you can't become a Category A club, or whether you think we now need to look at what we were planning on doing in a slightly different way because we need to become, and that might be for, might be we've got a great ground at Lorcombe Lane, it might be that we're getting £2 million off Bradford Council to put a new main stand in. It might be that still wouldn't bring it up to Super League standard. So instead of doing that, do we need to look at maybe a new ground on the edge of town, appealing to the whole of the Aire Valley? And I think it's just putting the onus on the clubs to look at how they can be better.
Yeah.
And now is probably not the time to be saying, I think the proposal of just ending promotion relegation is the wrong one. I suspect from their recruitment that they've done this already this off-season, which has been fantastic. They were looking at being one of the leading clubs. And they still can, because if they got promoted, they would still go up. It's just that when they got their grading, they might not be as high up as their playing position gives them.
But the thing is, this idea that promotion relegation is going is wrong anyway. If a Grade B Super League club, if a Grade B club finishes bottom of Super League and a Grade B club finishes top of Championship, they'll be promoted and relegated and promoted respectively. So it's only that the only thing that really changes is that on the off chance that a Grade A club, i.e. a Leeds or a Wigan, finish bottom, which by the way hasn't happened for 42 years, which probably tells you why change is needed somewhere, then that's the only time that will ever change. So it's not really a change, it's just people getting in a hissy fit over nothing, basically.
And of course, that time Wigan cheated and broke the salary cap. But apart from that, you're right.
And even when Wigan went down in 1980, they finished fourth bottom. It was when there was four
and
went
they didn't
down.
come up as champions.
No, they
They
didn't.
were behind York.
You can sort of understand why Keighley of all clubs would be nervous,
Yeah.
given the history of 95.
Absolutely.
Which is still going about, but it is a long time ago.
Exactly, yeah.
It's nearly 30 years ago. So I think, and the signs are, it is a weird sort of time for them to complain, because all the practical sort of signs are great, aren't they? They're doing everything right.
Yeah, they're developing on and off the field. So
They are, yeah.
why come out with a statement like that?
And also it's an area which I happen to live in, which has got vast potential, because it'll take you into Lancashire, out to Combe and Burnley and places like that. It'll take you up towards Settle and those sorts of places, out into the Dales. I mean, Keighley could actually be the Rugby League club of the Dales quite easily, and it wouldn't be a ridiculous thing for them to do. But it probably would need them, as Phil says, to just maybe budge a little bit up that Aire Valley Trunk Road and look at a new stadium or something.
If they are genuinely rejecting it because they truly believe in those core traditional sporting values of promotion and relegation, then I almost applaud them for it, because, fair enough, if that's what you believe in and that's what you believe British sport should be, so be it. I mean, me and you have had a conversation about this for years, and I have begrudgingly accepted that this grading as it's gone to has to come through. I don't like it. I would much rather
But again, I
stick
think
with it.
that's playing to what we are and not
Yeah.
sometimes what we think
No,
we
I
are.
agree.
But it exists in football as well. I mean, certainly in the last couple of years, it's been a case of, well, if you win the National League, your ground's not good enough for your EFL. Tough, you don't get it. Or you adapt to our rules. Like Sutton United got promoted, had to rip out their AstroTurf pitch and put grass in because you're not allowed AstroTurf pitch. Harrogate have to do the same. So they did it. They go, right, well, we do it. Whereas, like, what it seems to be like is the way Keighley have acted now is that, say they were a football team, they get promoted to the National League. Say, well, we're not ripping out our AstroTurf pitch. Why should we do that? It's all wrong. How dare you?
Do you know the other argument I say that I find laughable is when people say, well, Brentford got promoted, Huddersfield Town got promoted, and we're competing with Manchester United. I hate to tell people, if Huddersfield Town were a rugby league club and we're getting the crowd said they're one of the biggest clubs in Super League. So it's an absolute baseless comment.
Yeah, they didn't compete anyway. They spent a hell of a lot of money to get out in the Championship and had a year in the Premiership where they survived, and Huddersfield are back where they were, and Brentford I don't think are going to be in the Champions League in the next couple of years.
No, but I think the point
the dream. It's all about the dream.
Huddersfield are back where they were, having had 500 million quid worth of Premier League money.
Yeah.
I think the other thing to mention, and obviously it's not intruding on private grief of another sport, But you do look at
Well-
one that isn't dissimilar to another that plays with an oval ball, and the problems they are having at the moment with overspending and under-regulating, you know, we don't want to go down that road.
Yep.
You know, that you would think that certainly Wasps, I don't know enough about Worcester, Wasps would have been a Category A club.
Should we go by the
Lost to the
Coventry Stadium?
Lost to the game. So again, I think you do
Take
have
the money
to,
out of Salford, out of Odsal and put it into...
you do have to show a degree of, you know, regulation of your own sport,
course,
and not
yeah.
just leave it to
Agreed.
market forces.
Should we buy some... Have they got any decent players coming, Nick?
Midlands Hurricanes should be knocking on.
It's a terrible name, Wasps, anyway, because they're parasites, aren't they? Or just annoying.
Yeah, no one likes wasps.
Why do you have so many names like that? Wasps, Sanderson. They have no connection to any players.
Rochdale Hornets.
Yeah,
Rochdale
Hornet.
Hornets.
Hornets were one of the first, weren't they?
Used to be a wildcat.
And I've been wearing my Wildcat t-shirt all day. Now that we don't have the name anymore.
You've got
I
some
like
funny
it.
looks in that pub.
That's just the hair.
Yeah.
That's just generally in general. The World Cup, as we, you know, the audience are waiting with bated breath to find out who's going to win all three tournaments. Who's going to win all the World Cups, Tony?
Oh, right, okay. 1, 2, 3. Now then, I think for all that we want somebody else other than Australia to win it, being, not playing to cliche much, but being a Yorkshireman, if I had to bet on it, I would have to say Australia.
You won't make much money, that's the problem.
No, yeah, I won't lose it is the point.
Well, that's true.
But if anybody but Australia is going to win it, then I think New Zealand. Again, boring.
If we just had the World Cup last year without them, we could have had somebody else.
England not even getting a look in.
No,
Sean, if
England
you're
are not
watching-
going to win the Men's World Cup, and I realise this is online, and I really, really hope I'm wrong, but I don't see that. I think it'll either be Australia or New Zealand. Clearly there's a chance that Tonga or Samoa might just surprise people, and that's great, and I hope it happens. But I can't see it past Australia. The other two, again, I can't see past Australia and New Zealand for the women's, but the wheelchair's another matter again. I think I have a feeling that's going to be the most successful competition in terms of people viewing it on the BBC, the wheelchair competition, and it's probably going to have a France-England final, in which case then probably England are going to win that.
People are used to watching snooker and bowls and stuff on BBC Two on an afternoon, and then there's all these people in wheelchairs bashing into each other.
Yeah,
If human dodgems, it's amazing.
It's just completely
Absolutely
exciting,
amazing.
and it's one of those things where you watch it through your fingers. I mean, with the wheels and stuff, don't people break their fingers?
That's what I always
It
do.
makes you cringe,
Unreal,
doesn't it?
innit?
But they
We'll always
don't care.
win. Yeah.
They don't care. They just do
They
it.
get thrown out of it, and they don't even have somebody running on to put them back in. They've got to do it themselves.
It's a pretty awesome spectacle, and I think that when people, the general public even, and rugby league fans, well, let's be honest, most probably haven't never seen them yet, are going to be impressed by that. And if England win that'll be big news in itself. But that said, you know, who am I to say England might well romp through and win it? I hope they do.
I forgot to ask you, Gemma, because you're there working there.
No, I actually agree with the boss here, actually. Yeah.
Oh, Gary.
No,
He's not
no,
saying anything,
I'm the
No,
boss there.
no, I know my role.
And he will definitely not agree with me.
I
But
know
I
I'm
do
fine.
think Australia will win the men's and the women's. But I am going to agree with Kevin Sinfield, who we saw at Waterhead Warriors last week, and he has also predicted that England will take the wheelchair.
Sir
World
Kevin,
Cup.
did you listen to his Desert Island Discs?
Oh,
You did?
Wholesome is how I sum that up.
Can you believe he picked Undercover's cover of Baker Street? I thought no,
I
it was
loved
amazing,
it. Oh,
amazing.
loved it.
Oh,
So, yeah.
What a man.
Australia, England. Sorry to England, men.
Kevin Sinfield doesn't listen to Six Music, does
No,
he? He's
so,
he's hard. He's smooth.
Doesn't strike me as a Six Music listener.
so yeah,
It's greatest hit.
Yeah.
those are my predictions.
Man.
Tonga to win the men's, New Zealand to win the women's, and England to win the wheelchair.
Even if Australia won nothing, wouldn't it?
It would be fantastic.
I was hoping someone would pick up.
I saw our Australian friends listening.
I could just see it happening, and then the Aussies say, "No, we don't care about international rugby league anyway." And the international rugby league calendar being ruined.
No,
The time will
I think
start.
it'd be the reverse.
Yeah.
I think that would come from they already know they're coming fourth ranked in the world, and it rankles with them.
Yeah.
It's their own fault because the ranking is based on the number of games you play, not the quality of your domestic
I,
competition.
I think that
So-
as well. If they lose, that's a good thing because
Yeah.
it will sort of fire them up more.
They'll try and send Queensland and New South Wales to the next World Cup, just to spice it up a little bit. Phil?
You asked this very same question at Catterick, and
I did.
I don't think my choices.
We've
have
had another
changed.
week now, I don't know.
No, but I think
It's
now
fallen off a stage since then.
now we've had a chance
We're
to
working every day.
meet the
Sure.
teams, look at the squads. It's possible that opinions could have changed. Having seen the strength of the New Zealand pack, even in part and even against opposition that clearly were there to provide an opposed training session rather than a competitive game.
These are not a nation.
They were
Yeah.
there after a week
Yeah.
on the drinking
Yeah.
IB for.
So you
Yeah,
can't
sure,
read
yeah.
too much into the result, but what you can say is that was an awesome pack performance with at least probably 4 players to come into that. The schedule is likely to have Australia playing New Zealand in the semi-final, and I think that New Zealand pack is stronger than the Australian pack. So I'm going to go for New Zealand to win the men's. I think the women's, it's going to be fascinating, an Australia-New Zealand final. I think the draw does work out that they can meet in the final. But the strength of the NRLW, even though I acknowledge and hear from people like Emily Rudge that this is going to be the best prepared English team, I think getting to the semi-finals will be a really good achievement and something that actually should be celebrated. Don't forget in the last World Cup, England's women lost to the Cook Islands in a group stage. I think we won't do that. I think we will make it to the semi-final and then we'll either play, I think it's New Zealand we're due to play, I can't remember. But I think Australia will win that. And I'm absolutely convinced, having spent a bit of time around the players that play for England in the wheelchair game and the fact that they've got Jack Brown, who's come back from Australia, who is arguably the best exponent of the wheelchair game that there is, and Seb Bashara. I can see England winning the wheelchair World Cup, and for me that makes it a successful tournament, irrespective of anything else.
And he's been coaching, was it Queensland he's been coaching?
Jack's been coaching the Queensland team that won State of Origin.
Yeah, so he'll have some inside knowledge.
Yeah.
Gary?
This is where I get told I know absolutely nothing. And I have had a bang to the head.
Again, is this like being at home then?
Yeah, well, welcome to my world. Having seen them play last week, I genuinely think England can win it. England can win the men's one. Because I saw them play Fiji, who were no duck eggs. They made the last 3 semi-finals. England played them without 6 of their best players who were sat in the stands about 4 rows in front of me. And to beat them 50-0 takes some doing. And I think, as always happens in tournaments, teams build as tournaments go through. I just think England have got enough in their arsenal to win the World Cup. I really do. I mean, obviously the small game will be the biggest testing, but what a game to start off with, and what a game to send a message to say, look, we are serious about this. And having spoken to a lot of the players, yes, they've been written off by a lot of people, but they're not really fussed about that, if I'm honest. Having spoke to them all. But no, I do genuinely think England can win the men's World Cup. Women's one, I'm going to go stereotypical and go Australia. Wheelchair one, again, like Phil said, I think it will be a France-England final. And I think England can win it. England can win the Wheelchair World Cup, but the French have got the facilities. I mean, I've spoken to a couple of players. The difference is the French have the facilities to hand, whereas here in this country, you're playing mostly on sort of basketball courts, sort of adapting arenas, where in France it's like you turn up, you're there, done. I think that may sort of help the French in their aim. They're used to the
They're very
surroundings.
unified.
They're used to the surroundings. They're used to the size of the arenas. They're used to having more fans around the court as well. So England can win it, but I think France will edge it just.
4th of November at the EIS in Sheffield, France-Wales. That's going to be the Geordie Boy Award, just bashing the French. It's going to be great. I think we're done. Thanks to the audience here in Newcastle.
Thank you for coming.
Where are we next week?
We're in Salford on Tuesday.
Salford on Tuesday
in the afternoon.
with
Well,
Are we going
I
now?
like to keep it.
TBC.
No, we've got a few. Steve Maskell's coming.
He's launching his book. I don't know if he's got a book out.
We're at St Helens on Thursday.
St Helens.
Steve Maskell's coming to that as well. He wants to launch it.
There's a theme developing.
Is it just because he's on the BBC podcast, he's doing ours now as well?
Yes.
Yeah, so 2 next week. It'll
Excellent.
be great. And Salford's in the afternoon, St Helens in the evening.
Tony, have you got anything to plug?
To plug,
You're
only
getting
4020.
applause there already, aren't you?
I am,
Yeah,
yes.
good, good.
Only 4020. Out
Well, no, there is a book on Batley,
today. There's a book on Batley, which has been out for a while now.
but it does give you as relevant a story today as it was when
Yeah.
you
Yeah, it does, yes, thank you. Have I got any other books? Being Eddie Waring, but that came out about 14 years ago, so I might struggle to get that. Although there is, if anybody's interested in knowing more about Eddie, there's they've just dug up all these old episodes of Desert Island Discs, which Kevin Sinfield was just on, and the Eddie Waring episode has been unearthed, which had been lost forever. And when I was writing that book, I had to go via transcripts from the BBC archives in Caversham. Well, now I could just actually listen to it, and I did yesterday morning, and it's wonderful. So I highly recommend, if you've not heard that episode, just listen.
Mayhem in Rugby League, apparently.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah. It's just a little chunk of the 1970s.
Mayhem in Rugby League. It's like chaos with Ed Miliband.
Yeah.
Matt, Rugby League Live.
Rugby League Live.
New signing.
You signing James Graham, columnist for the tournament. Yeah, pleased with that. Good capture. Better than reading what I write. So,
I agree.
I agree too. So yeah, we are going. I've pretty much sacrificed my life, social life, and everything else for this tournament. I've never known work like it. I'm booking December off. We're a bit crazy at the minute. We're writing too much, I think. So I'll just leave James Graham to do it all, and then quality will go through the roof. So.
I am trying to. I was asked for my availability for work because I've got a proper job for November, and it's like I want to go to all these games, but I also want to earn some money.
Yeah,
because I've got bills to pay. It's like, but I do feel this is like almost a once in a lifetime thing. So, Phil, apart from the magazine,
Yeah,
buy books,
fortunate to be contributing to the matchday programme for this World Cup.
buy the programme.
To which Gary has indeed contributed.
Someone's already flogging them on eBay for 13 quid.
I think
They don't
it's
even cost out of
I
the
think it's
ground.
worth it.
What, the...
World Cup programme.
What, have I seen it?
No, it's not out till tomorrow,
Yeah.
the first one.
Has it been printed?
And that's not me, by the way. I'm not like
The
nicked a
ink,
box.
the ink is still wet and
It's
it's
not-
being driven up here
It's not ended
overnight.
up in the same way as the Castleton and Huddersfield kit, has it?
Yeah, we're hoping that the van doesn't get kidnapped tonight on the way. But yeah, so that's a joy as well because you get to chart the tournament as it's happening. So yeah, if you are a collector of programmes or you do want a historical record of what we're going to get in the next 5 weeks, then get a World Cup programme.
£6 at the ground or whatever, £5 from the back.
Yeah,
of
the final programme will be a
Yeah.
tenner at the collector's edition.
Gary, the Sun, and everything else.
Just busy writing basically for the next 6 weeks, well hopefully 6 weeks, as England get to the final. But no,
So
it's
what,
been,
what happens if England don't get to the final?
No, I still-
Yeah,
dry
we'll
up?
keep rolling.
no, I still
keep
write
rolling.
about it. Still write about the World Cup and everything. But no, it's been really enjoyable the last sort of couple of weeks as it builds up to the tournament and the paper's giving it really good coverage and things like that. So I mean, I can't argue at all with what they've done. But I really like sort of getting the stories about the players and also like some of the stories that aren't England related, like Michael Chaker the other day, which spent watching Wales v Lebanon when Lebanon were very good, but and the Lebanon fans are very, very patriotic, like seriously patriotic. Like, I was like in Sale, Hayward Road in Sale, surrounded by Lebanese fandom. Like, whoa! I mean, I've seen patriotism in England, but that's a whole different level. That.
Just wait till you see what the Samoans were calling Matt Parrish on our YouTube page. Depends on what happens tomorrow. Thanks for watching. We'll be back throughout the World Cup. Salford and St Helens next week. Download the podcast, buy the magazine, do all the stuff. There's the off button.